What's happening, Mississippi? You have found the Sit Down with Russ Latino right here on MPB Think Radio. I'm your host. Today we're going to talk with John McKay from the Mississippi Manufacturers Association, also with the president of Farm Bureau, Mike McCormick. We're going to talk a little bit about tariffs, tariff mania sweeping the nation, sweeping the globe. It's all the rage. We'll dig into a little bit what it means for Mississippi. I know last week at the very end of the program, we were kind of talking in anticipation of what the president's announcement would be in the Rose Garden. Obviously, that announcement came Wednesday afternoon. A lot steeper in terms of the rates that were going to be applied, a lot broader in terms of the rates that were going to be applied across really the entire globe than a lot of people had anticipated. The markets were roiled by that. I think on Thursday and Friday there were 4% declines in the S&P, which is big for anybody who's a market watcher. And certainly there's been a lot of conversation about what the goals of tariffs are. Is the goal negotiation? Is the goal to onshore business or protect existing industry? Is the goal revenue? Lots of those ideas have been thrown around. Some of them are kind of counter purpose. I say that as a lead-in because we've got somebody in Mississippi who heads an organization that deals with manufacturers. Manufacturing is a big part of the tariff conversation. John McKay, welcome to the Sit Down.
Yeah, thanks for having me, Russ.
So as you watch all of this unfold, and certainly manufacturing is a big part of that conversation, right? People are saying, hey, we've lost all this manufacturing over the last 30 years. What's your response to that argument that manufacturing has gone away in the United States?
Yeah, well, first of all, thanks for having me, and this is a very important conversation to have right now. There are 150, roughly 1,000 manufacturing employees across the state of Mississippi. So I like to say that we are the largest private sector industry in the state of Mississippi. So we obviously have a big role to play in our overall economy. So, one thing that I would probably point out to your question is that in the United States, if you look at a chart of manufacturing employment in the United States over the last 100 years, you see a pretty steady and steep decline in that number. A lot of people like to point to the early 90s when NAFTA was implemented as the breaking point of American manufacturing, and that's just really not the case. It's certainly moved industries out of the United States to other countries, but that was honestly probably going to happen with or without NAFTA. And so what you saw is a lot of no-skill or low-skill labor-intensive type manufacturing moving to other countries. So the reason that there has been that decline in employment over the years is almost 100% attributed to productivity. We have the most productive manufacturing in the world. And so with that technology integrated into our manufacturing base, it just takes fewer people to do those jobs, but they are higher paying jobs. They're much more technically skilled jobs. And so that's the context in which we're in now.
That makes sense to me. I mean, I saw two charts right next to each other over the weekend that kind of brought home the point that you just made, right? Where you look at the Bureau of Labor Statistics and you see right after World War II, there's just been a steady decline in the number of people within the manufacturing industry. And that was the same level of decline pre-NAFTA that it's been post-NAFTA. So there wasn't like a big drop that occurred because of NAFTA. And then on the flip side, when you look at the Bureau of Economic Analysis charts on manufacturing productivity, we're near record highs,
Absolutely.
Right?
Yes.
And so much of that is the advent of technology. And to your point, skilled labor, advanced manufacturing, I think is the phrase that I hear thrown around a lot.
Absolutely. Yeah, and another point that I would make is because of those trade agreements, and there are multiple across the globe, but let's just take NAFTA, for instance, that was renegotiated under the first Trump administration, let's say the auto sector. There are component parts and pieces that move across those borders with Mexico and Canada multiple times throughout the production process. And so what you really have to envision is it's not American manufacturing. A lot of manufacturing in America is North American manufacturing, where we really do collaborate with our partners.
So it's interesting you say that because I know Peter Navarro, who's obviously the president's trade advisor, was on one of the talk programs. I don't know if it was Fox News or what it was, but he was on one of the cable news programs, and he's gotten into this little spat with Elon Musk, right?
Yeah.
And And Musk is clearly sort of taking the traditional sort of free trade approach to things, and Navarro is a big fan. I don't think of tariffs as a negotiation tactic. I think he just wants tariffs permanently. And he referred to Tesla as being an assembler, right? He said they're not a manufacturer, they're an assembler, and then kind of listed off parts that came from other parts of the world. The interesting thing is that Tesla is actually the most American-made car of any of them. If you look at the percentage of stuff that's coming from overseas, it's very small compared to any other manufacturer, including Ford, Chrysler, Chevy, you name it, right? So setting that aside, I think the point is a very interesting one that most people don't recognize. When you're manufacturing in America, what percentage of the parts that you're using are coming from somewhere other than America?
Yeah, no, that's that. So I don't have the full breakdown in front of me right now, but I know, kind of sticking to North America, a third of all manufacturing inputs for Mississippi's manufacturers, a third of those inputs come from Mexico or Canada. They are by far, it's China's in there, but Canada and Mexico are huge trading partners. So that's where you have to kind of step back and say, these broad-based, you set it up very well, these broad-based tariffs that really don't align with maybe national security interest or even economic interest, when they're applied across the globe like they are now, that really does impact that production and that trade across borders. And that's where we don't have the manufacturing capacity to fill all those gaps. So if you were to say, hey, we want to stop doing that, and we want to do that all inside of America, I just don't know how you can get there in any quick amount of time. And I'm sure some of these folks are your members, but one of the industries that kind of rises to the level of the easiest to understand for me around this issue is the automotive industry. And so clearly Mississippi as a state has chosen to make some big investments in Nissan, Toyota, Packard, even in the tire realm, if you're talking about Yokohama or Continental. And I'm sure there's others that we could list off, right? Yep. But big investments that have been made at each one of these places, and also big employment numbers at each one of these places. And you look at it and you go, okay, well, we're going to apply a 25% tariff to steel or whatever the number is on aluminum. And you start to look at the numbers and go, okay, well, 50% of the aluminum that we use in the United States comes from overseas. 25% of the steel that we use comes from overseas. Those are just obvious input increases in terms of cost. What are you hearing from automotive manufacturers about what this is going to do to them? Well, we're sort of in that phase right now where it's a little too early to be determined. I've seen some announcements from some autos essentially messaging to their consumer base that says, hey, we are going to hold off any price increases until this date or based on these scenarios, which obviously is to their consumer base. But internally, they are really scrambling to figure out, are there any other opportunities within their supply chain? And that's the supply chain, and the way that's developed in this global economic system is actually incredible. And you saw the breakdown in COVID, and you saw the detrimental impacts there. I mean, I think a lot of the inflation that we saw was really driven by some of the supply chains just completely broken. And so when you put a tariff on these kind of things, businesses scramble to figure out how they can continue without that price increase. And there's just not going to be enough opportunity to develop those new supply chains in this amount of time. So there needs to be, China, for instance, they are a bad actor. And we probably should have long ago put them in our crosshairs to do something like this, to use our leverage with our economy to say, the theft of intellectual property is a problem. The state subsidies that China offers its manufacturers is a problem. And if you don't do something about it, we are going to do X, Y, Z. That's where I think this idea of tariffs or other economic sanctions could really play a powerful role, because we are the largest economy in the country, in the world. And those are the types of things that I think would be a positive economic tool. This, however, I just don't think that we're prepared to address some of the issues that are going to flow from this.
A lot of big questions coming out of it. It's time for a break. We're sitting down with John McKay, President and CEO of the Mississippi Manufacturers Association right here on the Sit Down. We've got a lot more to get to, so stay tuned. We'll be back in just a moment.
You don't want to miss the next Mississippi Antique Showcase coming to Oxford, Mississippi, May 2nd and 3rd.
For a $100 donation, you can get a showcase ticket, complimentary food, cocktails, and an on-site appraisal, or a chance to be on the show. Or for $60, you can just come and be part of the party. Call 1-844-874-6874, visit mpbonline.org, or scan the QR code on your screen.
We can't wait to see you in Oxford for the next Mississippi Antique Showcase.
Hi, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Bobby Rush. As a blues man, I love Mississippi Public Broadcasting. If you support Mississippi music and their local programming, donate now, right now, and become a member today, not tomorrow. Thank you, thank you, thank you. Doesn't matter how big or small, but we prefer big. Thank you very much.
At the Mississippi Arts and Entertainment Experience in Meridian, we believe in the power of the arts, storytelling, and education, just like Mississippi Public Broadcasting. MPB connects communities across the state with quality programs that inform, inspire, and engage. Their audience is loyal and appreciative of businesses that support public broadcasting, which makes underwriting on MPB a smart investment. Join us in supporting MPB. Learn more at mpbfoundation.org.
Listening to the Sit Down right here with Russ Latino. Forgive the pause. I'm trying to get the microphone or headphone wire on the other side, Germaine. Radio technical difficulties.
I've got you if you need me to.
No, you're all good. You're all good. We're talking with John McKay, Mississippi Manufacturers Association, obviously talking about tariffs, really about the impact on Mississippians. John, I think one of the misnomers that you hear a lot is, oh, we placed a 104% tariff on China, so China is going to write the United States a check whenever a domestic importer brings something in that was produced there. Talk a little bit about sort of the fallacy of that, if you will.
Sure. Happy to do that. And that is, and again, a lot of people aren't trade experts, so this kind of conversation is useful. First of all, a tariff is a tax. I mean, it simply is. I mean, there's no way around it. It's another name for a tax. And if you look historically, back in the 1800s, early 1900s, the United States government was largely funded by the income from tariffs. That was used to fund the government. And that was the era before the income tax and some of the other revenues that we have now. And then since that early 1900s, you've seen tariffs slowly fade away as free trade opened up. But what happens is the company that's importing that good is charged the tariff, and that is directly passed on to the domestic company that is buying that good. So there may not be a dollar for dollar that trickles down directly to the consumer, but a large portion of any tariff that's applied is eventually going to show up in the retail price of any good. So if you say it's a 20% tariff on a raw material or a component part of an end good, you could take a portion of that percentage and apply it directly to the end sticker price. That's how it basically works. And I know that's a little dumbed down, but that's essentially what happens.
Yeah, and I mean, there's an argument, obviously, that each piece in the food chain can eat some of the loss,
Correct.
right? But eventually,
Yes.
the loss gets to the consumer and they pay a higher price.
That's 100% what happens.
And so, yeah, it's interesting that you bring up the experience in the late 1800s and 1900s. Obviously, President Trump also talks about that period as sort of a golden age when government was funded by tariffs. I think it's important to realize that government was substantially smaller.
Yes.
Right? So at the time that the McKinley Tariff Acts of 1890, which the president is fond of, were passed, and by the way, they were also repealed 4 years later as the economy shrunk and unemployment went up. But at the time that those things were passed, the federal government made up 3% of GDP.
Right.
Today, it makes up 23% of GDP. So to fund our government with tariffs similar to that time period, we would essentially have to cut 90% of our federal government.
Right.
Which I don't think anybody's at this point suggesting we do.
Right.
So yeah, lots of things to consider in all of this. I'm curious, like on a Mississippi level, we've talked a little bit about automotives. Are you hearing from any of your other manufacturers that are concerned about this? What's their take on what you, John, should be doing right now?
Right. Well, we are working very closely with our national association, the National Association of Manufacturers, to not only work with the administration and our congressional friends to figure out the best way forward, but also trying to figure out from our membership what these impacts are. And I'll be honest, there are always going to be winners and losers in this tariff conversation. So there are going to be some sectors and some individual businesses that probably come out on the good side of any of these tariff scenarios. I would argue that there is a larger majority that would be hurt by this. But, Mississippi has a pretty diverse manufacturing base. I mean, through our defense sector, you have huge shipbuilding down on the coast. We've got Raytheon Technologies right down the road here in Forest, Lockheed Martin, on and on and on. We big in defense, big in furniture, big in wood products, auto, just a lot of diverse industries out there. And I think at the end of the day, these tariffs are really going to impact folks in a way that they're not prepared for yet. So a lot to be seen.
Yeah, I think most economists at this point are saying that the price increases probably come 6 to 8 weeks down the road when inventories have been sort of worked through. I know you mentioned that some car dealerships are basically saying, come buy a pre-tariff price car. So it actually could screw up the data for a little while, that you might actually have a burst of economic activity right now where people are trying to make big purchases before they get more expensive. I think your point, though, that there are going to be some winners is a really interesting one. We've seen this somewhat, and we're going to talk to Mike McCormick next, but we've seen this somewhat in the agriculture conversation where you've got like shrimpers on the Mississippi Gulf Coast saying, hey, this is actually beneficial to us because you guys are effectively making it harder for my competition to be in this market. Mm-hmm. On the flip side of that, if you're an exporter as a farmer, you're looking at it going, man, we're trying to sell soybeans, and one of the biggest markets for that is China. And oh, by the way, that market almost got ruined the first go around because they set up this thing in Brazil where Brazil is now supplying a lot of the soybeans. So my market's going to be smaller because of retaliation, right? And so there are going to be winners and losers. I'd say this too. We talked about this off break. Is there was steel tariffs that were put into place during the first Trump administration, and if you were a steel worker, it was very good news. So you saw in Pittsburgh and Northern Ohio 1,000 new jobs created in the steel industry, and you go, well, that sounds great. But all the industries that purchase and use steel are actually much bigger than the steel industry itself, and they lost 75,000 jobs during that period because of higher price steel, lower demand. That's winners and losers, but kind of to your point, the losers was a bigger section.
Yeah. Well, and then again, we're so interconnected in this global economy that to even anticipate who some of those winners and losers are is almost impossible until you see, you saw China earlier today talk about further retaliation. And that's what these trade wars end up being, is constant escalation. And until we're able to say, and again, some folks point to this as a master negotiating tactic. It very well could be. But in order for this whole plan to work, businesses need certainty. And so if we are going to have a long-term tariff plan, that needs to be pretty well communicated. But if it's a negotiating tactic, then we think it's short-term. So how does a business make long-term investment plans for what's possibly a short-term negotiating tactic? That just, again, creates this cloud of uncertainty, and businesses only invest when they are relatively sure that there's going to be a return on that investment.
And, part of the problem, too, is first of all, let me acknowledge this. I think you're right that there is an argument that we have incredible leverage in this process because we are a huge market. We're the biggest market on the planet. People want to sell their stuff here.
Absolutely.
And because of that, we've got incredible leverage. Because of our wealth, we've got leverage. We can absorb the pain, even though it's painful. We can absorb the pain better than some other countries. And so there is a universe in which negotiations yield good results. There's also some thought that, hey, to your point around China, that if we wanted to take on China, we could have done that and then allowed other countries to become our suppliers.
Yes.
Instead, we've said, Laos and Vietnam, you're also going to pay 50%, or stuff being imported from your countries is going to be at a 50% premium, which makes it harder for them to fill the gap that we're saying, China, we don't want you to fill anymore.
Right. Well, it's funny. I was going back and reading some of my notes from, it was about 12, 14 years ago. There was a initiative called the TPP, the Trans-Pacific Partnership. It was specifically designed for this scenario, to punish China and open up those Pacific markets further to America, to essentially say, hey, China, if you're going to continue doing these things, we're going to go around you. We are going to, and that's when you saw Vietnam, Cambodia, those countries really have massive foreign direct investment into their countries because they were seeing the writing on the wall, essentially, that America was going to do this thing. Well, that ended up getting caught up in politics in this free trade discussion that, if you do that, you're going to lose American jobs. And I just don't know that that's the case.
Yeah, so we pulled out of the TPP in 2017, right?
I think that was the official time where Trump said, we're just not going to do it.
Yeah. It is interesting that in a lot of ways, some of the negotiations and offers that are now being made are essentially to return to what it looked like under TPP.
Right.
So obviously the input thing matters, right? So if the parts that you're using to manufacture products in Mississippi are more expensive, the product that you're producing is more expensive, what does that do to demand and what does that do to the labor market?
Yeah, and I kind of go back and think about some of my smaller members, and just for clarification, we do represent some of the largest names in the country, certainly in Mississippi and in the country. That's the Nissans and the Toyotas and the Ingalls. Those are Caterpillar. They all manufacture here. They're all fantastic members. But by far, my largest membership is the small to mid-sized folks. So I worry about my component part manufacturers that rely on a raw material, let's say rolled steel, to make components that under this regime might increase their business because people need those metal components for their product at a tariff-free rate. But if their raw material goes up 25%, have we really accomplished that goal? Is that product now priced out of the market? It's to be seen.
Yeah, I think anybody that has the mindset that made in America is possible in the sense that every single thing that goes into a product is going to be made in America or sourced in America is probably being a little naive. I mean, there are obvious examples. Coffee's not grown in America. Bananas aren't grown in America. There are lots of things. But there are comparative advantages that different countries have in terms of what they produce. And at some level, it's foolish for us to not take advantage of those comparative advantages, right? If somebody can supply us a really high-quality product at a lower price, that benefits Americans. It benefits American manufacturers. So as you go through this sort of last word, what do you think the prognosis is?
Yeah, I hope that there is, over the next handful of days, weeks, whatever, that there is a little bit more consistency in messaging and clarity on what the ultimate goal is and how our domestic manufacturers can participate in that goal. And I think with that, you might see some calming of the market. You might see some businesses to kind of take a breath and talk about some future investments. But without some kind of clarity and certainty, you're just going to have a lot of business capital sit on the sidelines and wait for that sort of moment where they're comfortable. And that's what I worry about the most. And look, Mississippi, Governor Reeves, the legislature, we have done tremendous work over the past 10 years getting to where we are now, look at the announcements over the past 2 years, 3 years, whatever it is. We need to keep that momentum going, and I just really worry that this might be an impediment to that continued growth.
Yeah, it is incredible. Second fastest growing economy in the country right now. Obviously, what they've done with the budget has been impressive, going from a $700 million deficit annually to a $700 million surplus. We've got the news around the income tax cuts, the news around education reforms. All of those things are big. Germaine, did you just whisper sweet nothings into my ear?
I do that a lot. You've got about a minute. You're good. You're good. You're good.
I was. This is not my day. I was watching the clock. I thought we were done on time. John, I'll regale you with a quick little story. I had a friend reach out to me who does manufacturing. Manufactures some in the United States, manufactures some in China. Right. He reached out to me last week and said the amount I pay in tariffs is going to go from $200,000 a week to $1 million a week, and this was before President Trump added the additional 50%.
Right.
And so you're talking about $1.5 million. Mm-hmm. And basically said that's bigger by a lot than my profit margin. Mm-hmm. And his problem was that he's got retailers like Walmart and Walgreens, medical suppliers. So this is not a cheap trinket. It's something that's used to save lives. He's got suppliers or retailers that he sells to where he's got contracts to sell at a certain unit price.
Yeah.
So this guy's looking at it going, I'm about to lose considerable amounts of money to the point that it might put me out of business.
Right. Well, that's a great point. We have companies, I've gotten similar calls, and things in manufacturing aren't on a weekly basis. So we have companies that have made orders for products that 6 months ago that are now coming into port with these tariffs that they didn't account on. So it really could be a problem.
John, thanks for coming in.
Yeah.
Have to do it again.
Thank you, Russ.
I'm so bad at keep.
Hello, I'm Desiree Frazier, host of the award-winning news program, Mississippi Edition. We bring you conversations about the latest news from across the Magnolia State. Whether it's politics, healthcare, or education, you'll hear in-depth discussions on issues that matter to you. So join us each weekday morning at 8:30 on MPB Think Radio, or download the podcast, listen through the app, and online.
On the original Southern Remedy, your health is our main concern. I'm Dr. Jimmy Stewart, professor of internal medicine and pediatrics at the University of Mississippi Medical Center, ready to answer your medical questions.
I sleep with a CPAP, and I just been using regular tap water. Is that not a good thing?
I'm 78 years old, and I have hot flashes that are horrible.
The original Southern Remedy has the answers to your questions every Wednesday morning at 11 on MPB Think Radio.
Together through the years, together in the future. MPB, your stories, our mission.
You're listening to The Sit Down with Russ Latino right here on MPB Think Radio. From manufacturers to farmers, we are joined now live in studio by Mississippi Farm Bureau President Mike McCormick. Mike, good to see you again.
Thank you for having me.
How have you been?
We've been good. Very busy. It's the end of the legislative session, and we spend a lot of time at the Capitol. There's a lot of things going on in Washington, D.C., as you know. So all the policy and advocacy things are busy, and now the farmers are back in the fields if we can dodge some wet weather and doing what they do best, and that's growing things out of the ground.
Yeah, and look, I want to talk about, obviously, what's going on in Washington. The tariff conversation has dominated the news cycle for the last week to 2 weeks, certainly. Big impact on farmers. We saw that in the first round of tariffs that happened in the first Trump administration, both in terms of domestic production, but then also in terms of exporting. Before we get into all that nitty-gritty stuff, though, give me a sense of where things are for a farmer this time of year. Are they getting fields ready?
Well, it's absolutely. We're in the heat of the battle right now. So a lot of the corn that we plant is in the ground or is coming up, or the farmers are wrapping all that up. They're looking at soybeans next. Some of those probably have a few of those in the ground. It's been really wet and a little cool, so that may be dragging on a little bit, and then they'll finish it up with the cotton crop that'll go in a little bit later. So our cattle farmers are all out on ryegrass, if I had to guess, in South Mississippi, and looking to move some spring calves to market here pretty soon. So it's a busy time for farmers in Mississippi.
Yeah, there's something to that that sentimental value that I think all Americans have towards farmers, right? It's the God made a farmer, right? That you guys are in a lot of ways the ones that are producing that something that is so fundamental to us living and being sustained, even in a very modern world. We got to eat, right? And you're out touching dirt with your hands. You're out moving livestock. You're out growing something that has a real tangible necessity, not just value, but necessity to people.
So it's a salt of the earth job, and what we do at Farm Bureau is the Lord's calling, I think. We're out here supporting the farmers and being their voice for advocacy in Washington and down at the state capitol, so they can get out and drive their tractors. That's why Farm Bureau was started in 1922. They needed a collective voice, so we put all the farmers together, and they give us direction. They pass our policies that we support, and we're out working for those people to support their way of life. But the farmers, just like you said, they have such a special calling and a special place here in the United States. I don't think a country that can't feed itself can't defend itself. So who wouldn't want to support the farmers?
Well, and the incredible thing, and we'll obviously get to this, is you're not just feeding people in Mississippi, and you're not just feeding people in the United States. You're feeding people all over the world.
That's right.
With your productivity, right?
Yeah, we can outproduce anybody on the planet, and that's why we got to have export markets, because our farmers can produce way more than we can consume here in the United States. So that excess has to go somewhere, and that's exported somewhere around the world.
Help me understand, I think people sort of intuitively know that agriculture is a big part of Mississippi, right? Mm-hmm. It's certainly a big part of Mississippi's history. How many farmers are part of the Mississippi Farm Bureau?
So the Mississippi Farm Bureau currently has about 175,000 members. We have associate members that might be here for some of our member benefits, which is our insurance products through our insurance company or for other reasons. But we keep track of the active farmers, and there's about 45,000 people that list themselves as some way active with farming in the state of Mississippi.
And what's the range in terms of what are they growing, what are they raising?
We represent 19 different commodities with Farm Bureau, so everywhere from all the major row crops to some of the fruit and vegetables, all the way through the livestock industry to honeybees. If you can grow it, if it's grown here in the state of Mississippi, and we grow a lot of different things. Our soil, our climate is very diverse from Memphis to the coast. We can do a lot of different things in a lot of different areas. So it's a wide range of things that people do and affiliate with Farm Bureau for.
And how long have you been involved with Farm Bureau now? And kind of what's the background that puts you in this place?
Yep. So I was fortunate. I grew up on a farm in the first grade. The first sentence I ever wrote was, "I want to be a farmer when I grow up." That's really all I ever wanted to do. But I grew up in the best of times, I think, in the 1970s, where our farm was growing and flourishing. Unfortunately, my father passed away my senior year in high school, and he didn't want me to come back to the farm. It was trending in the wrong direction. The early 1980s to mid 80s were probably the toughest time since the Great Depression that we had seen in farming, and a lot of farmers lost their farms or transitioned out of it. And my dad wanted me to go somewhere and get a business degree and get off the farm. So I did that for a while, and the Lord had a calling for me to go back, and married my high school sweetheart from our own little town in Union Church, Mississippi, and she had an opportunity to go back and work in a rural county, and I followed her back after a career in business, and was able to start my own farm there on our family farm that's been in our family since the 1820s. I guess a few years into that, I got contacted by my local county farm bureau office, one of the board members that said, hey, you need to come in and help us be the voice of the Jefferson County Farm Bureau group. And I started going to meetings and wound up being the county president. I saw firsthand how Farm Bureau impacts both rural Mississippi and farmers through our process, and really got enamored with the process. Made it up to the state board level. We have a state board of directors, and served on that for a while. And our former president saw something in me that said, you'd be a great president and you need to run for this office. So I did that 10 years ago, and it's been a wonderful ride, a dream come true. I get to do something that I'm very passionate about, standing up for our farmers and the things that make them successful, and to give them a brighter future in agriculture, and looking forward to working with them this year and into the future to keep that going.
And look, I mean, obviously, and I appreciate that background, because I think it's important that people realize that you're not just some lobbyist, right? You actually are a farmer.
That's right.
Obviously, we're working our way through a potentially volatile time. Not just for farmers, but for manufacturers. We talked to John before you were in. You know, obviously a lot of people in the automotive industry are probably trying to figure things out. There are a lot, energy sectors probably trying to figure things out. A lot of moving pieces right now. Yep. I think when we saw tariffs implemented on China during the first Trump administration, one of the groups that was particularly hard hit were farmers who were exporting crops overseas. Yep. And we ended up having to see subsidies come into play to sort of bolster those farmers during that process. Yep. As this process unfolds, I mean, the big set of tariffs took effect this morning. Mm-hmm. As this process starts to unfold, what are you hearing from your members?
You know, I'm going to be flat honest. I'm not hearing from my members because they're out driving their tractors and doing what they do best in farming. I think what you're going to see is them get the crops in, and then see how that turns out in August and into the fall. And then they're going to start tallying up whether they made any money or not. And then you're going to start hearing the input later, a little bit later in the year. So I do agree with you. I think this all started with the tariffs in the first round of the Trump administration, to where we started having some eroding of our markets. I think Brazil primarily has been a benefactor of where we've been with this policy. It continued through the Biden administration. The only difference is they didn't continue the CFAP payments, or the Trump payments as the farmers called them, and the markets never came back. So now we're going to see what's going to happen with this round, and I don't know. I think just a few days into it is too early to tell. I think the markets reacted just like you would expect last week, nervous, and dropped probably further than it should have been, and they're beginning to come back today. I hadn't checked it late this afternoon, but I think we just got to see where this is going to go. I think the farmers very clearly know that we are being not treated fairly in trade deals. We need trade deals. The last administration did nothing for free trade or free trade agreements. Those need to be updated. A lot of them are outdated, and see if we can get some of our market share back. So I think our farmers support that. The difference that I see is that in the first Trump administration, when we started this, the farmers had been through an economic time that was fairly good to them through the previous 10 years to that, and they had some reserves built up in their bank accounts. They had some savings, out there, but those are gone now. I'm really concerned about the financial health of our row crop farmers. It's not good. It's not good here in Mississippi. Last August, the bankers started coming to us and said, hey, are you watching this? Because we're seeing the balance sheets, and that's something that we don't ask for at Farm Bureau. But they were seeing them, and they said, I don't know if we're going to be able to make these crop loans going into next year. Something's got to be done. So we kind of raised the flag for our group in Washington, D.C., and we just have a great group that are ag-friendly, all of our delegation, and they agreed and started working on it, and Congressman Trent Kelly came and to our aid and started writing some disaster payments that would offset some of the losses that the farmers saw last year because of the low prices that we were getting on commodities. And it really helped. It was $10 billion in that bill. It helped the feeling of the lender because most of that money was signed right back over to the banks when the farmers got that. So that's sort of where we are right now. I think the farmers are out farming. I think everybody is a little on edge to see how this is going to play out. If it plays out quickly and it brings back some markets that we can compete in fairly, I think then it was a big win. But if it drags on, just like the other sectors that you talked about, I think it could be pretty harmful to the farmers long term.
And obviously, you guys are part of a larger sort of affiliation, a national affiliation of farmers, right?
Yeah.
What is the national organization saying, or what are their sort of concerns? Is it similar to what you've just expressed?
Absolutely. So we have an American Farm Bureau Federation, got about 6 million members nationally. The offices in Washington, D.C. We have lobbyists and attorneys and a national president who's from Georgia. He understands Southern agriculture, and he is expressing to the White House that this is unsettling times for farmers. There's a lot of nervousness out there. The president has relayed back to us that he has the farmers' back, so we will see how that goes. I was really impressed. I was there a few weeks ago, and Secretary Rollins came to see us. She said it was her first official act to a board of directors like that. All 50 state Farm Bureau presidents were there, and she was very upfront that she's our voice in that she has his ear. She has been in his inner circle for quite some time, so she was leaving our meeting to go back to him to talk about some potential tariffs with Canada, and I think she did some good because we really depend on Canada to send us some of our major ingredients on fertilizer. And he backed away and didn't do anything with the USMCA countries, Mexico and Canada for the most part. So we're at least the fertilizer wasn't impacted yet.
So I want to talk more about that when we get back from break, but we do have to take a quick break. You can stick around for another segment.
Absolutely.
You're listening to The Sit Down with Russ Latino. We're talking Farm Bureau President Mike McCormick. We will be back in just a moment.
Hi, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Bobby Rush. As a blues man, I love Mississippi Public Broadcasting. If you support Mississippi music and their local programming, donate now, right now, and become a member today, not tomorrow. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Doesn't matter how big or small, but we prefer big. Thank you very much.
On the original Southern Remedy, your health is our main concern. I'm Dr. Jimmy Stewart, Professor of Internal Medicine and Pediatrics at the University of Mississippi Medical Center, ready to answer your medical questions.
I sleep with a CPAP, and I just been using regular tap water. Is that not a good thing?
I'm 78 years old, and I have hot flashes that are horrible.
The original Southern Remedy has the answers to your questions every Wednesday morning at 11 on MPB Think Radio.
The Measuring Show.
Since 1970, MPB has been enriching the lives of Mississippians.
Everything we do gives us the chance to grow and learn.
With your support, we are always there whenever and wherever you need us. Together through the years, together in the future. Please consider making a donation at mpbfoundation.org. MPB, your stories, our mission.
You're listening to The Sit Down with Russ Latino right here on MPB Think Radio. Tariff Mania today as we talk about some of the impacts, not just in a theoretical sense, but in the sense of two of the leading industries in Mississippi, the impact on those industries with manufacturers earlier in the program, and now with President Mike McCormick of the Farm Bureau, Mississippi Farm Bureau. Thanks for sticking around for another segment. Before the break, we were talking about sort of some of the inputs that farmers need in order to do their jobs right here in Mississippi. And you were talking about fertilizer. Did I understand correctly that the potash that's coming out of Canada is not being tariffed at this point?
Yeah, I don't think we've seen the increase on potash coming out of Canada currently. I think Secretary Rollins talked us off the ledge on that one. So I'm hopeful that we can keep that off the table for this point in time. It'd really impact farming going through the spring and getting everything in the ground.
Because 85% of that comes from Canada, right?
80% of the potash comes from Canada.
Okay. And then you're getting fertilizer from other countries as well?
Some of it comes here from the U.S. We make a lot of our nitrogen here. So, yeah, it comes from different places. We can get some nitrogen shipped in from Europe and other places, but potash is probably our number one ingredient that we're importing.
And then in terms of like heavy equipment, if you're talking about tractors and things of that nature, are those all being purchased domestically, or are some of those coming from overseas as well?
Well, I think John Deere makes most of their equipment here, but what you find is that the components in that tractor, the parts of the tractor that are built, a lot of that's built in other countries. And as a matter of fact, I'm told that some of that in the Midwest, some of those manufacturing facilities, they will make part of the part here in the United States, ship it to Canada. They put some parts on it. It goes back to the United States. They put some parts on it, and it goes back. It may cross the border 3 or 4 times before it actually makes it into a tractor. So that would even make it more impactful on tariffs if they hit it every time that it crossed the border.
And I think that's an important point that a lot of people don't realize. It's not just, hey, did you buy the tractor in the United States? But for every part that gets shipped from outside of the United States, there's a tariff associated with that part. So that, and John and I talked about this a little bit, 1/3 of all manufacturing parts that go into American manufacturing products come from overseas. Right. And so that certainly has an effect of driving up cost. Are you hearing anything about farmers sort of rushing out to buy equipment now versus waiting to see what comes down the pike?
No, it's quite the opposite. The farmers are going to get behind because their bank accounts are pretty slim. And so what they've done this year is they've cut back on all the purchases. I would think the equipment companies are taking it pretty hard right now because I don't know that there's been a lot of demand from farmers to update the equipment that they have. They're just going to try to run it another year. So we've been in this cycle now for 2 years, and this year will be year number 3 where commodity prices have been below production cost. And unless something changes for this year, it's not going to be any better than the last 2. So that money, the profits that they could have possibly made to update the equipment has just not been there. So they're tending to run the equipment that they've got a little bit longer, and they can keep those balls in the air for a little bit, but not for long. The equipment we have now is so technical. A cotton picker, some of the sprayers cost over $1 million a piece. There's technology in it that's unbelievable. It makes us more productive. But at the same time, after it gets some age on it, that technology is very hard to keep going. It's very expensive once things are out of warranty to keep going. So you can get some pretty high repair cost back to your operations if you let that equipment get out of warranty. So I think they're going to have to do something sooner rather than later. By another year or so, I'm sure they're going to have to try to update some of this equipment. But I haven't seen any indication that they're jumping out and buying new stuff. I just don't think they have the money.
So you alluded to something earlier that I think is really important in this conversation. Is obviously part of the conversation is, what are we adding to our cost to produce crops? Because we're having to bring things in from other parts of the world that have some tariffs associated with them now.
Yep.
The second part of that is, what markets do we no longer have access to, or where demand's going to go down because the price of our product has gone up because of retaliatory tariffs? And so give me a sense of How much are farmers exporting from Mississippi to other parts of the world?
I think about 20% of our income comes from exports. And I know there's been some that would say we're not shipping anything to Canada, so that's not going to affect us. Well, I don't know that that's exactly true. So if you have soybeans that
to Canada or China, I'm sorry.
To China.
Yeah.
To China, I'm sorry. That's the market that's going to be impacted the most. So if we have soybeans, which is our biggest export to China, if they're coming out in an elevator in another state, in the Midwest or in St. Louis or wherever, and it's still that market that is being filled, and those soybeans are going out of the grain bins. I don't know that they actually know if those soybeans came out of whatever elevator you want to say in St. Louis, or did they load them up or finish loading them up in Vicksburg? I strongly suspect that we do have exports to there. Now, in the livestock sector, specifically for beef cattle, whenever I raise a calf, that calf doesn't go to processing for the most part here in Mississippi. Some niche markets do, but for the most part, they're sent off to the Midwest where all the corn is and the feedlots and the processing plants are out there, and they get processed out there. Well, that calf could potentially be shipped overseas, or it may go into the domestic supply. But overall, Mississippi is exporting product around the world, and certainly some of it's going to wind up in China.
I know the U.S. Trade Representative's office, which is underneath the president, at least as of 2022, said that Mississippi was shipping $2.7 billion worth of agriculture to other parts of the world. And they at least said that Canada, Mexico, Panama, and China were the top 4 recipients of Mississippi exports. Does that ring true to you or sound right?
I think that's right, and I think China's fallen to number 6 right now. But I had someone tell me in a trade meeting one day in D.C., and you get to meet a lot of people that do this line of work, that China is not a trade partner. They're just traders. That's just what they are. They drive markets up. They drive it down. So you got to be careful how they manipulate the market. One of the things that I can say that they used to do with beef that I'm sure that they're going to do again is they would buy the beef. They would say that we're not going to buy the beef. The price would start going down, and then you would all of a sudden see a country like Vietnam starting to buy a lot of beef. Well, where's it going? It's just going to Vietnam, and then they're turning around and brokering it into China. So I think you're going to see that. I'm concerned about our cotton farmers. That's something the acres has really been going down, but they're going to be really dependent on China because we grow it here, but then it has to go over there to be woven into something that we bring back over here and sell. So,
well, Mike, I appreciate you sharing what's going on in your world. We're out of time. I'd like to have you back at some point, though, to be able to have a conversation maybe a few months from now when we have a better sense of how all this plays out. Certainly hoping that farmers are able to get their crops in and out and that things get back to normal for you guys. So thank you for coming in.
Yeah, let me just close it out and say I think farmers want fair and free trade and a better trade agreements. So if we can get that done in the short term and have a little short-term pain, I think the farmers would support that.
You've been listening to The Sit Down with Russ Latino. It's a production of Mississippi Public Broadcasting right here on MPB Think Radio, funded by generous contributions from listeners like you. Today's show was produced by Germaine Flood, with live stream production by Abram Nanny and Joseph Hall. For my special guest, John McKay and Mike McCormick, I'm Russ Latino. Stay tuned for Southern Remedy right here at 11 a.m. and join us next week for the new episode of The Sit Down, heard only on MPB Think Radio.